Good morning, everybody. My name is Richard Brent. I'm the editor-in-chief here at Briefing Magazine, which I hope many of you know talks about everything under the ever and perhaps increasingly apt strapline of smarter legal business management. This morning, I am pleased to be here chairing the next event in our Work-Inspired series, which we are running with our partner NetDocuments. And these discussions are designed to support law firms on their journey towards increasing team productivity and ultimately, of course, delivering better value to their clients in several different respects, namely helping them to protect, to organize, deliver, plan, and learn from various aspects of work. And today it's all about the business of getting organized. It's the Organise theme today. Helping people to continue to find the best opportunities to collaborate with one another in law firms, which often, of course, now is when they are no longer in close proximity to one another, releasing greater productivity and also considering the case for more process automation in different parts of the business to improve working and project efficiency. And joining me today to unpack all of that, I have a great selection of guests. We've got Simon Ferres, who is the Chief Information Officer for Legal at Deutsche Bank. We've got John Turner, the Chief Operating Officer at Ellisons Solicitors. Lynne Jones, who is the Head of Library and Information Services at HFW. And representing NetDocuments, we have Guy Phillips, who is the VP of International Business. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here.
Morning.
Morning. Morning.
And before we get into the very, very serious stuff, we're talking about time management in a way here. The clocks, of course, are going back in a few days' time. In case you didn't know, you hadn't heard that. As someone said to me, unfortunately, it's not about 3 years back, but there we go. So sort of start of a 10. I wondered if you could each tell me if you had an extra hour in your day. How would you use it if there were 25 hours a day instead of the unfortunate 24? Perhaps you might have rethought that based on the lockdown experience. I don't know, maybe not. How about you, John?
So if I had an extra hour a day,
just 1 hour.
just 1 hour, I think I'd probably split it into two 30-minute chunks. Once 30 minutes of responding to emails, which would mean I was just a little bit more sharper than at that. And then secondly, I would probably use 30 minutes just to think about team development, or how I could help the people that work for me.
Yes, yeah. That time to reflect is perhaps very much needed at the moment, of course. Lynne, how about you?
I would do no work in it. I would read. One of the things I'm really missing about the commute is just that opportunity for quiet time to read. So it would be quite nice to get that back.
Yeah, absolutely. How about you, Simon?
Cooking, I think, actually. So nothing work related, but I'm an awful cook. I can just about cook for heaters. That's about it, really. So I think I'd use that extra hour to learn how to cook.
Just something basic, not a new sort of loaf or anything.
Feed myself.
The essentials we're talking about. And Guy, how about you?
I think I'll pop round Simon's and
you'd be welcome.
one of these meals that he's cooking.
I need a guinea pig.
That's your bubble sorted there, then. And
So,
I must say,
I think with all these things, it's difficult, isn't it? You gain an hour back, which is what we're all trying to do with technology, to give people and deliver, more time to do the more important things in life, whether that's cooking, reading, or team activities. I think for me, I tend to sort of focus at the moment quite a lot around the team, because with a disparate team and not really getting an opportunity to get together, I think it'd be useful to create something with the team, maybe do a dragon's den or something like that, add a bit of humour into it as well. So, but other than that, definitely popping around Simon's for some fajitas.
Sounds good. And Lynne, you stole mine with your reading, because that was mine. I was doing very well at trying to read every week something non-work related, because obviously I do quite a lot of reading as part of the editorial gig here, but also non-news related, non-terrible news related, some sort of fiction or something. But as lockdown went on, I got worse at making myself do that, even though it was very beneficial. Okay, well, that's interesting. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for sharing that. And now we're going to, Simon is going to talk to us first off, just for a few minutes, on the client perspective, of course. So Simon, CIO for Legal at Deutsche Bank. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Morning, everybody. So I wanted to actually pick up on the topic of automation just for a few minutes, and there's sort of 3 or 4 themes that I wanted to bring out from the work that we've been doing around automation of the legal department at Deutsche Bank. We call it our legal digitalization journey. And the first piece really is around not sort of holding technology out there as being the silver bullet and the panacea for all transformation that happens within your within either the law firm, for those of you that are listening from law firms, or corporate legal departments where you're in-house. And focusing on the process up front will not only help you to determine what technology you need, but it will also help you to use the technology in the right way. There's a long list of disastrous projects out there where good technology effectively comes to die in organizations that misuse the technology because they haven't really thought enough about the process that they're going to exploit and leverage the technology in and around. So focus on the process as much as the technology. I think that's the kind of key first piece of advice that I would want to draw upon from my experience. Yeah. Then start to look at gathering information and data points around your existing process, so that you've got a yardstick when you're moving into that or through that automation journey. I'm sure car manufacturers in the 1970s didn't just suddenly decide that they needed robots and the robots would make an impact. They would have a view of where they would sit in the automation process, and they'd also look at what results they were getting from the robots in that example once the robots were being exploited. And it's no different when you're thinking about legal services. It's where you want to move the dial and where is the dial before you move it, and that gives you a return on investment. It gives you feedback on the benefits, and it should then act as a bit of a virtuous circle and a catalyst for getting further investment and further interest in your automation journey. Not everything can be automated as well, and you'll start to see that with certain edge processes once you start to look at your organizations and the service models that you're running today. Then just to focus on the actual prioritization. Legal technology and the whole automation journey can be a bit of or very much a sweet shop of goodies at the moment. Yeah, where do I start? Do I start in the document management space? Do I start in the document generation? Do I look at our e-billing systems? Do we look at reporting tools and analytics, etc.? It can be rabbit in the headlights sort of scenario of where do we start and where do we get the biggest bang for our buck? So my advice around that piece specifically would be, you need to think about achievability, and you need to think about the level of investment and whether or not there's any natural sequencing to the investments that you're making in automation. Because as you start to look at the processes, you will start to see actually that, for example, having a backbone of your legal department and your law firm around a single golden source for document management makes more sense as an entry point into automation than trying to automate a downstream process, for example, around document generation, because you simply don't have the metaphorical conveyor belt set up to actually run the process and the technology. So there'll be an entry point, and the prioritization is key to that, and you'll start to see that there are investments that are sort of in that sweet spot space of high return, relative low investment as well, and you can start to prioritize the big pieces and maybe some small high impact opportunities as well for automation. So not everything is a cruise ship style project that means that you're going to be running it for 2 or 3 years, and maybe some high impact opportunities along the way as well.
Okay.
And then the final point just around automation is at Deutsche Bank, we are heavily reliant upon our ecosystem of external counsel. And our automation journey and digitalization journey for the legal department doesn't start and end with what do we do ourselves. We look at our external counsel as obviously as part of the service, end-to-end service of provision of legal services within the bank. So we're asking the external counsel to provide automation opportunities and leveraging new technologies as part of the ongoing mandates that we ask them to support us around. And we've put that challenge out to all of the external counsel that supports the firm, and we're starting now to see some really good ideas coming through, and then we should get a increased value in return for them, in theory, using the right technologies and increasing the level of automation around the services that they provide as part of that mandate. So those, just to summarize, those are the key things really. Focusing on optimizing your process, understanding your process as it stands today and gathering data on it, prioritizing your demand, not going after everything at the same time. There is a logical sequencing, and leveraging your ecosystem of suppliers as well to help you on that journey.
Thank you very much, Simon. Before we bring the other panelists back, just picking up on your final point there, can you tell us whether there's a particular way that law firms have already, or a law firm or law firms generally have already helped you on your automation journey? You sort of said, you're seeing some things coming through. I wonder if you can sort of pick anything out. Not necessarily names, of course.
There is one example at the moment that we're working with external counsel on, and it's for the M&A part of the business, and it's effectively a deal room technology that allows automated drafting and negotiation of documents relating to deals. There's typically a lot of, for any of you that have been involved in this type of activity, you'll know this, there's a lot of toing and froing of communication. There's a lot of collaboration around documents, and the technology that's been used as part of the support that we get from this specific law firm is effectively streamlining the coordination and the dialogue and the collaboration in that context. So that's probably the one that I'd want to mention.
Okay, thank you. Interesting. Okay, we are going to bring back Lynne and Guy and also John now, and also just to mention to those of you listening in, if you do have watching rather, if you do have questions yourself that you would like me to put to the guests, please do make those known in the Q&A section, in the Q&A chat bar at the bottom, and I will feed them through. So any first impressions on what you heard there, Guy?
Yeah, I think from my point of view, there are a few things there that stood out that Simon was talking about that are of interest to me and hopefully the rest of the audience listening in. The one thing that I was quite keen on, it was actually one of your last points that you made, Simon, was around the deal room collaboration, which sort of got me thinking from Deutsche Bank's perspective when dealing with your external counsel. At what point do you decide whose applications you're going to use? Because presumably the law firm themselves that are your counsel external and your internal team may be using different applications. So where does that meet in terms of agreement on joint use of applications, or does that happen very much?
It's a good question actually. And I should just start by saying my field of vision isn't complete in terms of kind of what happens day to day, but what I have gleaned from the discussions that we have been having with one or two law firms specifically is I think it depends on the role that the law firm plays on the mandate. because then that will determine whether or not it makes sense for them to be effectively using their technology. So if their role on M&A is lead on the coordination of it, and we're effectively a participant in that, it's down to them essentially to put the best process and tool set in place that allows you to most effectively run that mandate essentially. And that's, I think, how it tends to take place. And then all of the different or the different counterparties or organizations involved in it will be actors within it essentially, rather than necessarily they need to take control. They may then have work that they need to do internally, maybe to host some of the documents prior to them being kind of formally pushed into that deal room as such. But the law firm, if their role is to act as coordinator, they'd kind of pick it up from there and decide the best tool for the job.
Okay.
I'd be interested in how closely the sort of the process that you set out at the beginning there, Simon, sort of matches how law firms themselves think about automation, you know, in terms of how you were talking about how you prioritize it, and you made that point at the very beginning about how obviously not everything can be automated, and that made me think about a piece of research that we do every year called Legal IT Landscapes, where we survey views on all sorts of different types of technology. But a couple of years ago, we sort of identified this automation gap within law firms, that essentially people told us they thought that processes in general could be almost twice as automated as they were at that point. But I wonder whether that also, you know, reflects that some things just can't be good. To your first point. So maybe John, if you could tell us sort of, you know, what's the sort of the automation gap, if there is one, like at your firm? Is that something you see, or is everything automated that can be?
No, definitely not. And certainly reflecting on some of the things Simon said, I completely agree with. You know, it's not just about technology. You've got to look at the processes as well. I am interested in Simon, how Deutsche Bank prioritise automation and decide which ones in what order. But from Ellisons' point of view, and I'll come on to it in a little while, we've decided what our first automation plank is going to be, but being a fairly small firm of 250, we would pick what we're going to automate, because what we don't want to lose is that key client advice, and making sure that we've got the value and the client perceives the value. We don't want to ever be a kind of call center law firm. We're much more than that, and our relationships with our clients are always for the long term rather than the short term. Okay,
yeah. Lynne, how about you? What's sort of the big picture when it comes to automation at HSFW, perhaps particularly when it comes to your own role and function? But you're on mute, Lynne, sorry.
I would say that we're at the beginning of the journey looking at automation for us. So but we've got a whole thing across the firm where we're looking at workflows, we're looking at our processes, reporting practices. So it's happening across the business. In terms of how we're doing it across the legal spectrum, I think we're looking more at high volume, low margin work where we can achieve profitability through cost control on those things. And I think they're the things that we will look at to automate first. But obviously you need to be able to do that without any drop in client service. So you need to, as Simon says, you need to make sure that you're automating the things that it makes sense to automate and that can be automated, and not just doing it for automation's sake. In my area, we're looking at things where we can save time. So obviously there's lots of stuff coming through from our suppliers who are talking to us about artificial intelligence and doing things in different ways. And I think what's quite interesting is how much of that really is artificial intelligence and how much of it is just an automation of a process that's always been done manually. And I think there's a very blurred line between what is actually AI and what's just a better way of doing things. But we're definitely looking for the better way of doing things.
Okay. Yeah. What about in this year then, this period of great challenge, of course, in terms of getting people together to do things? Has that been a particular opportunity to automate maybe to more general business processes, not necessarily on the legal work side? in any of your firms, or indeed at Deutsche Bank?
I would say so. I think automation, it's legal has always stood out as an area where it's ripe for automation, but as we've all, I guess, unilaterally agreed, there's a time and a place to automate, isn't there? But in these times that we're in now, you start to see probably the handoffs for inefficient processes more than you ever would have done previously. Wouldn't it be nice if I could just see everything from start to finish and where it sits without having to spin round on my chair and ask someone in the office, or pick up the phone or email someone at the other side of the world in large organizations, etc. So transparency as part of the automation topic's key, because everybody's working remotely, because transparency means that you then probably move towards a more efficient process as you're automating. But as a branch of the automation, collaboration as well is key, because you can automate, but because we are humans operating the automated process, we need to collaborate as well. So the dialogue and the communication needs to be interwoven with that optimal process as well. Then you spot things that go wrong, you spot things that go right, and you just generally have a good view of, you know, what you're operating as a service, essentially.
Yeah.
And how important, Simon, is the security implications of that, particularly for somebody like Deutsche Bank, or at the pinnacle, in terms of the secure side of things, where particularly when you're starting to collaborate with external parties or remote workers in these times? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, really, really important. I mean, we've obviously got, it goes without saying that we already would have a very secure means of collaboration internally, where we've got monitoring happening, we've got very secure encryption during as communications in transit, and everything that we need. But the more we start to open up the ecosystem of collaboration to external firms, the more potential blind spots we've got around communication, and that leads to questions around potential for surveillance, and are you going off piste from standard means of and channels of communication? That means that the bank could have blind spots in any of the dialogue that happens that introduces risk or perceived risk. So it's really important. So as we start to look at using collaboration, for example, as we're halfway through a NetDocuments implementation now, and we're starting to look at in time exploiting some of the collaboration functionality that's in the product, we need to make sure that we're doing it in a way that's compliant, which means that it can be monitored and we get the benefits as well. And that's the challenge, is making sure that we're not straitjacketed by control that means that we can't collaborate enough, but we're doing it in a way that means that we don't introduce unnecessary risk to the bank.
Yep. Thanks.
We have a question from the audience, actually. So they say all firms say that automation should happen around the high volume, low margin work, but some have proved or say they've seen that it works also, of course, on the other side, which I suppose is the more complicated transactional work. Does the panel have any thoughts on what those opportunities might be from the perspective of their own firms? Lynne, perhaps?
Yeah, so I think as I said, the obvious thing for us is the high volume, low margin work. But there's not necessarily a huge tranche of that for us. And that, I think, has been one of the things that's always slowed us down on the automation part, because we don't have work streams that are particularly repetitive. And I think people have always seen the benefit in automation as being around that repetitive work. We're exploring it much more widely now, and we've got some work streams. So we've got a new project management office in the firm. It's a new function, and they are doing lots of work around exploring where we'll get benefit from this. So there's a big project happening at the moment, talking to different groups of the practice, and our shipping practice are finding that there are bigger work streams where actually automation will help, that we hadn't particularly perceived it being beneficial for before. So I think there are those opportunities out there. It's just making sure that you can identify them properly and that you can definitely see the benefits for them. So we have a COO whose mantra is the juice worth the squeeze? And I think that's a really important question. So yes, you can automate it, but just because you can, should you do it? And if there is a benefit to doing it, then you should definitely explore it.
How about you, John?
We've certainly we've got some automation around literally around the high volume. So residential conveyancing as an example. Our other practice areas, which are lower volume but higher value, we haven't looked or tackled at any of those, and you know, we're on our digital transformational journey, which I'll come on to a little bit later, and we'll look at those further down the line. But because they are higher value, we just need to be very careful about the client experience, and make sure that, you know, the client can see the value that we're adding. That may sound very simplistic, but otherwise you lose the client.
Yeah, no, fair. Do you think that the potential is there though with those other types of work?
I think there's always potential, and you always have to look. But it's actually making that return on investment, and you know, whether it is going to upset the client, or you can do it transparently so the client doesn't notice, and we see the benefits internally.
Yeah.
If I could just add on Lynne's point about is the juice worth the squeeze, is quite an interesting one, because from a technology standpoint, we're constantly looking to innovate in areas that give a return on the user interface, you know, the way that the user gets their benefit out of the product. And there are some areas that on the face of it don't seem to give huge return, but are incredibly valuable in terms of time saving. Examples of that would be things like we launched a product called Smart Viewer earlier in the year, which allows you to look at documents and then to do a search on a document for a particular transaction size. So it may be that you've done an M&A transaction previously and you're just trying to find documents that related to that, and it was a certain size of transaction, or it might be that there was a third party expert witness involved in something, and you can remember their name but you can't remember the matter that they were involved in. So being able to find those documents through circuitous routes, which just has huge time-saving implications, particularly on, you know, the research side of the firms and within businesses where you're just looking for information and getting accessibility to that really, really quickly.
One of the other topics that I think it's worth mentioning here is data and standardization, because you can have an optimal process in your organization with few handoffs, a very streamlined, very efficient digital process. But if you haven't got the data that runs through that process normalized, if you don't have, and for example, if you've got different views of your counterparty or your client, and we have big issues in Deutsche Bank around this, then you're effectively talking a number of different languages metaphorically in that process. And that can mean that to the naked eye, it might look like you've got an optimal process, but actually when you look at the results of it, you can end up with deficiencies in what you're getting out the other end, because your data hasn't been standardized through it as well. And I think that's something that when organizations are looking at appliance of technology to automate processes, it's effectively the bloodline all the way through the process is the data. The data's in the documents, the data's in the systems, etc. And getting that piece right pays dividends when you're optimizing a process.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. We're going to move on to our next subject now. But if people do still have questions on anything they've heard so far, I'm sure we can weave those in a bit later on. But for now, I'm going to say goodbye to Guy and to Lynne and to Simon this time. And John is going to stay with me to talk about his experience and his firm's experience of managing remote teams through this rather crazy year.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. So just a little bit of background. Ellisons is a law firm that's been around for over 250 years. We're based in East Anglia, over seven sites, one of them being London, which is obviously not East Anglia, 250 people. And as we cruised into the beginning of the pandemic, we had a two-tier system in place, and we hadn't realized that we'd done that. So we had lots of people who had mobile devices, and therefore when the pandemic hit, they could work from home. And we had a lot of people that couldn't work from home. So we deployed a different tool set from our IT department, and they were able to, broadly, we can now have everyone working from home. But what that highlighted is something that we already knew in terms of our digital transformation journey, and that was the missing piece of the jigsaw for Ellisons was document management. So we had all of our people working from home, but they still had to travel into the office from time to time to pick up physical files. And therefore, during the pandemic, I think we took a fairly bold decision when we were saying goodbye to some of our people through restructuring, and we closed one office, to actually invest in a document management system and to start to deploy it during the point where people are still working from home, and indeed the suppliers are working remotely as well. We're currently in pilot with that document management system, and it will be if all being well, it will be in place by the end of the year, and that will mean that all of our people can work anytime, any place, anywhere. Now, if we actually reflect back and think about our people, we're currently running a situation where we're advising people we would like them to work 2 days in office, 2 days in the office every week. They don't have to. It's not one size fits all. Many work many more, and we just manage that. But what that means is we've now got 250 people that are dispersed across the country that we need to manage appropriately, and there's a number of things that we've seen through that's been quite difficult. One of them is really an old management style, which is if I can't see you sitting in the office, I don't know whether A, you're in, or B, you're busy, or what you're doing. And of course we have time management tools, because that's how we make our money as a law firm. So we have that tool set. But what we've done to try and improve that is to manage individuals' expectations by giving them a different set of information with regard to the firm's performance, both in terms of looking forwards in terms of fee generation and cases being opened. And we've shared that much more widely. We had Teams before we went into this, so we've used Teams for team meeting, and obviously for this type of webinar, and for talking together. But we've had to adjust the performance information to our head of departments, and we're also retraining all of our people in performance management, because working from home does put a strain on managing individuals. So with our head of HR is going through that at the moment, and she's virtually retraining, if you like, or training again all of the line managers just to put in place what good performance looks like. So we're just trying to erode some of those barriers in terms of managing remote teams. I was interested in Simon's discussion or talk, because we decided from a prioritization point of view that document management system, the NetDocs document management system, was important for us because it was that missing piece, but also it would enable better collaboration between lawyers whilst they're at home or in the office. So we get the benefit of that collaboration, but we also get the benefit of a better version control. And that is, if you like, our first step down the automation, I don't want to say journey again, highway. And one of the other things that we did, just to ensure, again, leaning back on prioritisation, we have a number of equity partners here who manage the firm, and we put in place something that we call the high-level project brief, which is just a two-sider, a two-pager, that when you put in front of the top people in the firm, they can understand what it is we're trying to do, how much money it's going to cost, how long it's going to take, and more importantly, what the benefits are to the firm. So at the end of the rollout of our document management system, we will have a number of success criteria that we expect to tick off, and it's just another way of A, informing, and B, being able to measure it at the end of the project.
Thank you. Lots of change there for you. Before I bring the others back, we've actually got a question for you already, so I'm going to put that to you straight away.
Sure.
Might Ellisons be thinking about expanding Teams to use for external collaboration with clients? Is that on your?
We are using Teams for external collaboration. We decided not to use Zoom probably 3 months ago, because there was a whole hiatus around whether Zoom was secure or not. But we decided to go down the Teams front. Like Simon, we are very, very aware of our cyber security, and we don't like taking risks. We're a Lexcel accredited firm, and we like to make sure that we are as secure as possible.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, let's welcome back now again, Guy and Simon and Lynne. And Guy, I thought very interesting what John was saying there about specifically investing in the document management project at this time, because to deal with the complexity of managing teams and work in the pandemic. So I was just wondering if that's something that you're seeing more broadly, that firms are using this as an opportunity to do something like that.
Yeah, and certainly in very early discussions with John, going back several months now, we were looking at that in terms of how we could help Ellisons to achieve their objectives over the changing internal sort of landscape of their firm, which is, as you say, it's being mirrored by many other firms, not just in the UK, but more broadly across EMEA and the Asia Pacific region. So we've seen quite a significant uptick in firms that are starting or have already gone considerably down the line of moving towards cloud solutions, NetDocuments being pure cloud. And primarily, a lot of that is driven based on feedback by the firms not really the pandemic has kind of impacted the firm's abilities to have lots of IT staff in the office, managing implementations, managing lots of servers in their own environments. And so I think we've certainly seen more of a transition of firms looking at that being a cloud service provision to negate the need for the firm to focus on those areas and having lots of skill set around those areas, and actually focusing what they're best at, which is providing legal services or banking services or accounting services, and allow an external party like NetDocuments to take the heat out of the situation with regards to the IT infrastructure and just provide that in a cloud environment. So we've certainly seen a pretty significant uptick in interest just purely from that perspective from firms.
Very interesting, thank you. Another question from a watcher. We're conscious, they say, of being a solutions first mindset, and we wondered how others are approaching this business of understanding what they want to do before investigating how to do it. I think that probably goes back to the points that people were making about automation, as well as this second topic. What's your view on that one, Lynne?
So I think it's really interesting because it's a project that we've been looking at quite closely. So we have a new IT director who's probably been in post now for about a year, and when he came in, one of his big issues was how much tech we had, how many solutions we had, and what we were using them for. And so there's been a whole push for us about rationalizing what we've got and do we really need to bolt something on to something to make it work, or should it just work anyway? And should we be paying a company to change their solution, or should we just look for a solution that does what we want? I think there are so many things out there, and I think historically lots of firms have done, as Simon said, the thing of buying things and then trying to find a way to make them work for you. And so it is a case now of flipping it on its head and saying, we've got this problem, and then saying to providers, tell us what your solution can do to make this problem work, rather than us having a solution and then saying, let's now find a problem so that we can use it. So I think that is a big issue, and I think lots of firms have had the same thing. And I think it does just come back to that idea of working from the bottom up with things. So looking for the things where you think that you can implement an improvement, and then the thing that will improve it for you, rather than saying, well, we've got access to all this stuff, and so let's just roll it out anyway, regardless of whether or not it's the right thing to do.
And you're looking for those opportunities for improvement to be sort of surfaced to you from, you know, from people working
yeah, so the projects management team we've got now, we've got what they call a projects management hopper, and so anybody who wants anything done now, you have to submit a proper project management request, and it goes into the hopper, and it goes through a process then about whether or not it's going to give us return on investment, how difficult it will be to do, what the benefits will be, and how kind of wide-reaching the benefits will be across the business, across the clients. And they're the criteria now that we're looking at. But yeah, people are being encouraged to look for the solutions themselves, bring the solutions to IT, and then our IT department have now got a person whose job it is to kind of do that liaison role between the business, sort of the lawyer end of the business, and the IT end of the business, to make sure that the solutions that we're looking at work, and that we're looking at the right things, and that there's, you know, things are going to be used.
Yes, yes. And Simon, what about sort of in-house, you know, on the client side and in-house side? Do you have the same sort of challenge as Lynne was sort of mentioning there, in terms of there being so much that you could do, and deciding? I mean, you've talked about prioritization when it comes to automation, but technology more generally.
Yeah, exactly the same. I mean, we just on the solutions first mindset. I personally, I think it's a kind of, you need to understand the art of the possible and what's out there to some extent, so that you've got a view of kind of what's happening in the industry at large and what benefits of other organizations obtained with technology. But you kind of take that, or certainly I do, with a bit of a pinch of salt, because what might work for one organization might not work for yours for various different reasons. But you educate yourself around what's possible. And then, as Lynne says, you then back that up with, well, what do we actually need in our organization bottom up, and where's the demand around certain topics? So then you kind of come together on it. And I think that understanding what's out there and the art of the possible, as well, is, it's kind of the analogy of head in the clouds and feet on the ground. Mm-hmm. You need that vision, and you need to be pushing yourself, but you need to be realistic about what's possible as well. And that won't necessarily just adjust your level of ambition to where you're actually going. It's also the velocity at which you can go there. Because automation and change generally in the legal space, and this is just my experience, is it's not that quick. It can take time. And when you're thinking about, for example, implementing a new document management system, as John is and I am at the moment, you need to be realistic about what your cadence is as you go through that as well, because automation won't come overnight, and you need to keep hammering home the benefits of what you've procured or what you've built, to try and keep the teams that operate that service or process day to day on piste all of the time, and then you continue to get the benefits, and they're not eroded.
I think just one of the things we've found here at Ellisons is that we've had change fatigue in the past, because there's been a perception there's been too much change, or it's been done too quickly. However, what we're seeing now, because we survey our staff now through a little bit more regularly, because they are working remotely, is they're perceiving now that actually we do need to change, and there are things that we need to do, and actually change is now much more part of the landscape, and we're trying to move away from the word change and talk about progress, and that seems to have resonated better with our people.
I wanted to speak a little bit about the collaboration on documents, specifically on the law firm side. You know, are you trying, whether through the document management system project or in other ways, are you trying to help people collaborate not just more but differently when they're working on documents because of the situation that they find themselves in, to improve productivity?
Yeah, from our point of view, absolutely. The NetDocuments tool is going to give us a much better space to collaborate with clients over versions of documents. Our first pilot group is our corporate and commercial group. They're the ones that run the M&As in various different guises, and therefore having a data room or having a collaboration space on a document, you know, heads of terms or whatever, and understanding the version control, we see that as being hugely beneficial. The solution we have at the moment is quite clunky, so this is you know a good example of we've got a problem, and this technology will solve it.
And Lynne, are you sort of exploring opportunities to help people collaborate differently rather than just, as opposed to just more, which I suppose they need to do anyway?
Yeah, so we've been quite lucky because we've got 20 international offices. So a lot of the technology that we needed for the collaboration was there. What we've done to encourage it is roll out Microsoft Teams really rapidly. So I think we've rolled it out across all 20 offices within 6 weeks, partly in response to the issue that we were talking about earlier around Zoom not being perhaps the panacea that we thought it might be at the beginning. But so we've done that, and what we're trying to do now is work more on how we use the tools that are embedded within Teams. So the collaboration tools that are in there. So my team particularly are using Planner, which we're finding really good. So we can, and our IT department have set out some sort of spec around how they would envision that people could use it to get the best out of it. And I think that's really helpful as well, to have some guidance around the tools that you've got and what you can do with them. Interestingly for us, because it's been rolled out so quickly, we've used a third-party provider to help us with that comms around how to get the best out of it and how to engage best with it. And I think that's been really helpful, because I think one of the other things to recognise is that sometimes if you want to encourage people to use things, you don't necessarily have the toolkit to do that in-house. And so sometimes it's worth that investment to get people to engage with things in a different way and to bring them on board.
Interesting hearing what you're doing at HFW, Lynne, around Teams is mirrored by so many other firms around the world where they've jumped on it very, very quickly. And I think from NetDocuments perspective, that sort of drives us to react to those situations as quickly as we can, and so being able to quickly respond and have an agile development environment where, in the case of Teams, we saw that coming down the line, and lots of activity around that back in March, April time, I think it was. And within literally a few weeks, we had integration through Teams from NetDocuments so that you could collaborate and hold documents against that collaboration activity within Teams. So yeah, that's a really good example where suppliers like NetDocuments need to be agile and be able to respond really quickly to those kind of requirements in the industry. To just make sure that we're keeping pace with that, if not actually leading the charge on new ideas and new innovations coming into the industry, so that, as Simon was saying, having your head in the cloud so you can see that visionary side of things, but feet on the ground. So giving people that vision for the future so they can see where we're heading and what applications are available to them in the future, so that they can start to think about how that might give them advantage within their individual firms. Now is an important part of our activities.
Lynne, just coming back to you again, if that's all right. I wondered also specifically in terms of knowledge, knowledge sharing, not necessarily around documents, I realise that, but have you either through technology or through looking at how you do things more generally, tried to help people to share knowledge better in a dispersed world?
Yeah, so our KM team have a knowledge database. So obviously that is held on our intranet. I think there's been a bigger push to use our intranet more for knowledge sharing. So our comms team have been posting lots of stuff, and not just around, as you say, the kind of, I think part of making people work well together, and part of that collaboration is just letting people know what's happening across the business. And one of the things that's been really beneficial from lockdown is that I feel like we feel more like a cohesive single firm than we perhaps used to. We used to feel like a lot of different offices under one umbrella, and I think we're working better together. And I think that knowledge sharing piece, not just around kind of document type stuff, but around what people are working on and openings up within the business and opportunities for cross-selling and for collaboration across practice areas and things, has really come to the fore. And I think that's been a really interesting thing. We've also been doing lots of stuff around collaboration and knowledge sharing in a less formal way. So the firm's introduced something called Barista Twister, where we all have our names put into a kind of virtual tombola, and they get drawn out and you get matched with somebody else across the business, and it can be at any level, business service or on the fee earning side of the business, in any of the offices, and you meet them once a month for a virtual coffee. And that has led to some really interesting things, because people who ordinarily wouldn't engage with each other are chatting, and there's information sharing about what business services do and what the business do, and opportunities are really coming to light around that, which has been quite an interesting and unexpected development. I think it sort of started off as a social thing, and actually the business benefits have been quite interesting.
Oh, that's right. That sounds like something I would happily spend my extra hour of the day.
Yeah, they're meant to be 15 minutes. They can go on if you get somebody interesting at the other end.
Yeah. It's fascinating that this process of being separated, you say, has sort of brought the firm closer together. That's just really, I haven't really thought about it in that way before. I think people have said, different firms have said variations on that to me at different times.
Yeah.
Which is obviously a positive. We have got about 5 minutes left, so if anybody who is still watching us wanted to ask a final question, please do so. Now is the time. Maybe I could ask you each sort of for any sort of final reflections on what you've heard today. If there's one sort of takeaway from all of it, or something new that you want to bring in about how you've effectively led your own team, perhaps through this year, through these last 9 months. Maybe I can start with you, Simon.
Sure. I suppose it would just be one sort of final piece of advice around the sort of Organise theme, which is get the tools in place in your organization to allow everybody to communicate and to collaborate. Don't hold back on the sort of hygiene factors technologically. Get those in place, because if you've heard good examples today around Teams, NetDocuments, all sorts of different technologies and channels for the communication. But if you don't have that, then you can sort of forget about aspirations for automating your business, because you don't have the fundamentals in place to be able to do that. So my advice would be just to get those fundamentals in and let the communication take place, and then you can start to build on that kind of base of the pyramid and move things on from there.
Simon, we've had a question just come in these final few minutes for you, which I'm going to throw at you if that's all right. In my very first question to you, I said you didn't need to name any names, but they've said, can you give one example of a law firm that you've worked with, maybe one who has done something particularly great in your experience in response to the lockdown situation? I don't know if you're happy to do that.
I'm probably going to struggle to answer that question, because because I'm the CIO, I don't engage with the law firms directly on the mandate, so I'll probably struggle with that one. But we are seeing during lockdown a lot of ideas coming through from the law firms around better use of technology, and I'm seeing that coming through. Back to what I was saying before about sort of mandate-driven technological change from the law firms. So that's probably what I would say.
Okay, thank you. Lynne, how about you?
So I think my takeaway would be going back to what we were talking about before, that if you want to get efficiencies in your business, you should look to be empowered by the technology rather than be led by it.
And Simon? Oh, sorry, we've done Simon. I beg your pardon, John.
Yeah, I think my takeaway would be just taking the people with you. So when you've made your choice, prioritization of the solution, and you're implementing it and you're making that progress, is to engage with all the people and keep communicating and try and take them with you so that you get the best outcome that you can.
Yes. And Guy, a final thought from you, maybe.
Yeah, I think these sessions for us are incredibly useful as a supplier to the industry, and hence our reason for engaging with Briefing and running this series of 5 events. This has been the second one of those, and we have a further 3. I think they're all being recorded so people can watch these at their leisure. But from a supplier perspective, it's really encouraging to see how people are dealing with change at the moment and the innovation that they're taking within the firms and how they're using technology. I think from my point of view, there are 2 areas really that are really driving a lot of interest at the moment and change within firms, and that's primarily around the collaboration piece, and that's kind of a symptom of people working more remotely. And so hearing more about the collaboration side was very useful for me, and how technology is influencing that and assisting with that.
Okay, yes. Thank you, Guy. Yes, and as Guy mentioned, having talked already about protect and organise, we have more sessions looking at those other topics coming up in the next month or so. So thank you very much to my panel this morning, to Simon Ferres, Chief Information Officer for Legal at Deutsche Bank, John Turner, COO at Ellisons Solicitors, and Lynne Jones, Head of Library and Information Services at HFW, and of course to Guy Phillips of NetDocuments. I've been Richard Brent of Briefing. You can find us at briefing.co.uk and at Briefing Legal on Twitter. And I hope you'll join us all again next time. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.